So, ladies and gentlemen, what the fuck are we looking at? Provost Anahita Baird asked her closest assistants, who all gathered in her office. About an hour before that, Cat Logistics came back from their hunt for Kalisa Straya, and while the woman herself was dead, the company did find something else. Something extraordinary, a starship that, as far as Anahita could say, should not exist. She brought in Scylla Caress and her team, Gargoyle and Academician Sebastian, and tried to make sense of the data they saw on the screen. But the more they looked at this bizarre, organic-looking spaceship, the more they all realized that this was something well and truly beyond what they ever expected to find. I think the initial reaction from CLS officer may be right, Provost, Caress said after meticulously going through every bit of data. What we are looking at might be a vessel of alien origin. But in that case, how the hell was Tritakian able to keep this quiet? We had our probes everywhere, we scanned for all kinds of abnormalities, and they were hiding this thing just a few light years away from the core. Anahita started rambling, but Scylla raised her hand to indicate she was not finished yet. I suspect that this thing actually began as Tritakian Project, Provost. They had an outpost there, an outpost working on this Project Ziggurat, from what we know. And from what we've seen, from the way this ship is built and from the fact that the outpost was destroyed, I think we can assume that the project got out of their grasp. What we see here, Anahita, at least what I think we see, is a vessel made from scratch by an AI. I am almost fully sure of it. Then why did you say it was an alien then? Because it is. Tritakian worked on AI technology for centuries now, but they always had some ways of keeping their creations, well, maybe not under control, as previous AI wars can tell us, but at least roughly on our level. Think, an AI is capable of thinking and processing hundreds of thousands of times faster than a human, even human backed by most advanced technology. In previous iterations, like AIs installed on remnant machines, that processing power was limited, shackled so to speak, because it doesn't take a genius to understand that if a machine intelligence like that is capable of thinking completely independently, it would outpace its creators in a matter of days. But this, look at these schematics. We couldn't even hope to create a vessel like that, not in 100 years or more. I think Tritakian made a fully unshackled AI in that system, something that could learn and understand at 100% of its processing speed. It may have started as a human invention, yes, but by now it is alien. The bits of code Cart Logistics intercepted from its transmission are beyond our capability to understand, even though they look familiar. By now it probably doesn't think in categories that we could relate to in any way. Are you sure of that, Academician Caress? Of course not. This is mostly theorizing on my part, but it makes sense, and I think Tritakian expected trouble with it, which is precisely why they developed it in a system disconnected from hyperspace. So it could not escape if things went wrong, Anahita finished. But in that case, why didn't it chase down and destroy Cart Logistics? If it was able to wipe out that outpost and take out that Hamatsu ship in a matter of seconds, then the rest of the fleet wouldn't pose much trouble. Oh, no offense, Mr. Cart. I just know space combat is not your company's forte, she added to company's boss, listening over the comms. He did not reply. I do not know, Caress said, but as I said, we cannot expect this thing to think in our human way. Perhaps it didn't consider CLS ships a threat. Perhaps it's calculated that destroying them wouldn't accomplish anything. Or maybe it let them go as part of its unknowable plan. We don't know. We probably won't be able to know. Gargoyle tried to understand the code sent in that transmission, but she's stumped. And if one of the best hackers in the system can't even begin to comprehend it, I doubt the rest of us has any chance. On his end, Mr. Cart wondered if he shouldn't mention the music, the one that he heard so many times in hyperspace and lately emanating from that mysterious ship. But he decided to keep his mouth shut. They'd just consider him insane, and, quite frankly, he was wondering if he wasn't at this point. Instead, he focused on Gargoyle, who smiled in response to Scylla's compliment. Well, I doubt I deserve such a title if I can't make heads or tails of this bloody cipher, she said. But here's the thing, it's useless to us. The ship itself, fascinating as it is useless to us too. It's those purple thingies that floated all around it that are important to our plan. Still, I should have it. Anahita directed her gaze at Caress again, and indicated for her to speak. Well, Gargoyle is kinda jumping to conclusions there, Provost, she said with a slight blush. But generally speaking, she's right. The ship is something we could investigate sooner or later, but those purple motes of negative energy, because that's what these purple thingies were, as far as I can tell, now these are truly important part. Mr. Katz, I cannot thank you enough for these scans, and I know how close to death you came while trying to obtain them, but this is something that will speed up our project of reactivating the gates significantly. My project, Anahita's mouth said, but she didn't make a single sound. Caress continued. We need more time to properly go through the data, but I'm almost sure we see a way of using a phase field to contain significant amount of energy, negative energy. Our previous research indicated that controlled flow of said negative energy is critical to stabilizing a jump gate. So, if we could figure out how these modes were stabilized, we could probably use it to try and jumpstart one of the gates as a test. Not until we're sure. We do not want the repeat of Galatia incident, Anahita said sternly, and everyone in the room had to agree. Previous Provost Thomas Calico also investigated the gates, and his experiments caused Galatia system, the very one they were in right now, to end up disconnected from hyperspace for several months. Of course, we don't want to cause another famine, Gores said, but that's where Mr. Card journeys come useful. We know of locations of many other gates thanks to him, away from the core. Any experiments we could perform could be performed there, away from inhabited planets. Yes, but first we need to understand what we're working with. Scylla, Gargoyle gets to work on analyzing the data. Sebastian, if these two need anything for their research, provide it. I'm authorizing a full budget here. No, Gargoyle, that does not include importing lobster vodka from Voltan. Mr. Cart, she turned to the helmeted face on the screen. I am grateful for your cooperation. Once again, you and your company have performed something that I wouldn't think possible. I'm sending a monetary reward right now, but I do hope we can count on your help again after Academician Caress's work is done. Sure, we're too deep in this anyway to back out. You know our frequency. Call us and we'll come. We will do. However, I am sure I don't need to say it, but do keep the knowledge of this AI vessel and its location to yourself. Revealing it could have unpleasant and unpredictable consequences for everyone in the sector. The boss couldn't agree more. Something about that ziggurat ship made all hair stand up straight on his malformed neck, and he felt the urge to run away as far and fast as possible. Provost was right, this was too much for them now, so he gave everyone strict orders to never mention it again. Not that he expected that it would have too much of an effect on notoriously gossiping spacers, and after quick farewells, the company went on their way to look for a quick job to top up their finances. More importantly though, after everything they went through lately, Mr. Card believed the crew needed some familiarity. So, when a job to transport some construction materials for some unaffiliated party showed up in the mailbox, he took it without hesitation. They also delivered Hamatsu back to Callisto Ibrahim, although she was not particularly happy about the state the vessel was returned in. Still, she paid up, and the company moved on its way. Also, that time was a good opportunity to see how the system reacted to recent events. It seemed, however, that things were going mostly as usual. Mostly because several mercenary companies were hired by Tritakian to search for something, and Mr. Cart knew full well that something was his fleet. But the next 2 weeks went peacefully. They did their delivery job, and as soon as they got back to the core, received a message from Galatian Academy. There was a breakthrough, much faster than anyone expected, and Provost Baird had more work for them. Mr. Katz, perfect timing, she said as soon as the fleet was in comm range. We are currently loading up a newly developed gate scanner into a shuttle. As soon as your fleet arrives, we will send it to you so you can go out there and investigate these gates in greater detail. Slow down, Provost. What's that scanner you're talking about? Anahita paused for a moment, as if annoyed with the question. Then she sighed and started talking in that tone that teachers reserved for the particularly slow students. It is another step of our plan, Mr. Cat. Coress may be a problematic human being to talk to and work with, but once she gets to work, she gets results. She was working on deciphering contents of Calicor Archive and understood that my predecessor theorized that there is some form of field of something located inside the gates. Pardon this unacademic language here, but I am afraid we do not have proper vocabulary to even begin describing it. Truly, domain designers were light years ahead of us. Regardless, that theory was proven right when he performed his experiment, and even though he performed it in a stupid and dangerous fashion, we now know at least that this field can be interacted with, and Coress believes that in order to stabilize it, we have to use negative energy. And that's where your discovery of that weird Tritakian ship comes in. Still, Calicor experiments was dangerous, and we don't want to repeat it, which is why Coress and her team developed a scanner to investigate this field from a safe distance, without the need to interact with it. And that is where you come in. We will install that scanner on your ship. You will go to, say, 6 gates, because we need a good data sample first, and use it to investigate them. That is all we require of you. Details are unnecessary now, not to mention that if I tried to explain everything that Coress's research discovered, we'd be here for a month. Try me, Provost. Don't you think I'd know something useful, considering I was the only one who used these gates in the past? You used them, yes. But I use computer terminals every day, but that doesn't mean I know how they work. But do you have something to offer us? If yes, then please, by all means, share your knowledge. You're right, Mr. Cart said. I'd still prefer to know what I'm getting into there, though. No doubt, but in truth, we do not know, which is why we need you to scan these gates. As usual, try to keep quiet about it. Hegemony knows about the project, but we don't want anyone else to get any ideas. Last thing we need are Luddigs or Tritakian execs messing with the gates and getting us all killed. Oh, on that we can agree. Very well, deliver your scanner and we'll get to work. Good, the Provost said, but it was clear something was still on her mind. She looked straight at the screen, and Mr. Cart could see both excitement and utter exhaustion in her eyes. This project probably aged her by a decade by now. Sending the shuttle now, but there is another thing we need to discuss. I mentioned before that High Hegemon knows about our plan. That is not strictly true. He knows we are researching the gates, but has no idea about our plans to reactivate them. Judging by what he did to Calicor after Glacier incident, I suspect he will not react to these news well, which is why I need someone to meet with Baikal Dowd. Meet with him and explain what we want to do and ensure him that we only work for the benefit of humanity in Persean Sector. Mr. Cart's eyes went wide. Next to him, Varuna spat out her drink. You have got to be kidding, Madam Provost, the boss said after recovering from shock. You are aware that Hegemony is not exactly fans of us, right? I show up at Dowd's doorstep, I'm going to get thrown in a walk camp or more likely dissected in some lab. Yes, well, I have thought about that, and there is a way to prevent something like that from happening. Well, yes, by sending someone else. Sending me is, sorry to say, the dumbest idea I have ever heard from you. Provost's eyes narrowed. She clearly was not used to hearing things like that. She was opening her mouth to spit venom in response, but instead took a deep breath and tried again. We can't send someone from the Academy, that is the problem. If I do that, Dowd will just dismiss anything such a delegation will say, claiming that they're a side in the argument and therefore not objective. So it has to be a third party, someone not officially affiliated with the Academy. Someone like you. Okay, fine. And even if that is true, then how do you expect me to do it? I can't just waltz up there and demand meeting with the most important and powerful person in the sector. No, you can't. But as I said, we have a way around that. All you need to do is obtain proper diplomatic credentials, and before you say anything, this is going to be simpler than you think. The Academy doesn't just have friends in hegemony. We work with everyone who wants to deepen our understanding of the universe, even Ludic Church sometimes. And one of those associates of mine is important enough to get you your credentials. Horus Yarebe, Duke, or Count, I can never remember correctly, of Kazaron Station. Governor, basically, local ruler, one of the official leaders of Persian League. He already agreed to provide you with official documentation that will get you a meeting with High Hegemon. Mr. Cart wouldn't admit it, but he was impressed. Anahita really thought about everything in advance. You blackmailed him as well? He asked. There was no need. Yarebe, from what I know, also wants to get in touch with Hegemony, but he can't do it openly because his internal rivals would brand him a traitor on the spot. So he also needs a third party, at least to open up diplomatic proceedings, and that is, again, where you come in. Not to mention that he owes you. You may remember when Sebastian sent you out to look for a missing student. Well, that student turned out to be Yarebe's daughter, so he should be more than happy to repay you for saving his kin from the Ludics. Wait, you mean that obnoxious girl who... Mr. Cat remembered the raucous young woman who was making stupid videos laughing at the church. Didn't Sebastian say she was from Tritakian Corp? Yes, double identities and all that. Apparently they're all the rage in Persian League, and no wonder considering how often nobles there try to assassinate each other. But that's beside the point. Yarebe can get you diplomatic immunity you will need to meet with High Hegemon, and Baikal Daud may not like you, but with proper paperwork, even Warlord Kanda herself would be safe from his anger. He's not a kind man, but he has his honor. He will not touch you with proper diplomatic papers. That remains to be seen, though I somehow don't expect this meeting to go well. So, you will do it? Provost asked, as if she fully expected denial. Then her cold mask returned again. Well, good. Very good. We're too deep into this project to complicate matters now. And besides, all you need to do is inform Dowd of our plans. I will deal with his displeasure should it ever arise. Understood? Grant. Then off you go now. Go, scan the gates, meet Yarebe, and then go talk to Dowd. And be quick about it. I can feel that we're on the verge of finishing this. She turned off the comm and Mr. Cart looked at Varuna sitting next to him. She sighed heavily. Really, boss? Baikal fucking Dowd? We're going to get disappeared, won't we? Hopefully not. Provost is right. If we have official diplomatic immunity from the League, touching us could spark a war. And you saw the news. Hegemony and Tritakion are at each other's throats again. They can't afford another front. That sounds logical, yes. You expect this Dowd to be a logical man? Guess we'll see, Mr. Cart said hopefully, and punched in the course for another system. Dowd could wait. First, they had to at least begin to understand the gates, otherwise informing Hegemon about Provost's plans could be pointless, because without knowledge there would be no plan at all. But what surprised Count Logistics the most was how easy scanning the gates turned out to be. The Provost really was right. All they had to do was to reach one, and because they found many gates during their travels they had plenty to choose from, flip a switch on the scanner and wait an hour or two, and it was done. Now, getting to the gates was a bit more problematic. Once, the company had to bribe a pirate fleet, which decided to do some racing around one gate, and another time House had to terrify and scare away some scavengers who were trying to dismantle another one. But aside from these troubles, all they had to do was get to their destination, flip a switch, and wait. The data they got from flipping said switch, however, was certainly not that simple. Mr. Katz, Varuna, and all the officers stared at it for hours trying to understand what it could mean, but as far as they could tell, the readings they got made no sense. The provost, both previous and current one, however, were right. There was some sort of dormant field inside these gates, creating a vortex of unknowable readings. It was as if reality itself ceased to function within the gate. Basic things like mathematics stopped making sense, as the scanner desperately tried to make sense of something that seemed simultaneously more and less dimensional than reality around it. After fourth scan, only Mr. Cart kept inspecting the data, but even though every time they got more information, he still couldn't decipher what any of it meant. He wondered, not for the first time, just how exactly humanity even constructed these gates in the first place, and, at the same time, felt privileged to witness how they connected the entire galaxy. Sure, Domain was nowhere near perfect, but their technological advancements were, without a doubt, impressive. Then, with scans done, it was time to get diplomatic credentials from Kazaron, but that turned out to be simple as well. Varuna volunteered to get to Kazaron Station and meet with Horus Yarebe, claiming that, in her time as Tritakian assassin/infiltrator, she was quite often sent to work with Persean League nobility. And she clearly was good at it, because mere 2 hours after she left on the shuttle, she was already coming back, her mission accomplished. "Please don't tell me you punched the credentials out of him?" Mr. Card asked when she walked back into his cabin. "Sadly, no. Shame. Felt he'd be into that," she said with a smile. "But really, it was a breeze. We're doing him a favor after all. Alongside diplomatic documents, he also gave me comm codes which he wants us to deliver to High Hegemon himself. As it turns out, Horus Yarebe seemed to be very much into the idea of abandoning the League and joining back with Hegemony, and he wants to bring Kazaron Station with it." The boss was surprised to hear it. Most of the nobles from Persean League would never even consider abandoning their titles as petty kings of their own planets and orbital outposts. Yarebe must have been a rare breed indeed. "He also asked us to put in a good word for him to Mr. Dowd. That won't really cost us anything, so why not? And in return, we have these." She presented a set of 5 ID cards, each one proclaiming the wielder as an official diplomatic envoy of the Persean League. They had blinking lights on the side, which, as Varuna explained, were trackers. If something happened to them, the League would know about it instantly, which should keep High Hegemon's potential displeasure at bay. But even with that, Mr. Cat wasn't too happy about the meeting, even after Varuna volunteered to deal with it as well. It felt too much like walking into a trap, but at this point they were too close to their goal to back out. And so, ready for the worst, the company set course for Hegemony capital world of Chicomastoc, and already started planning how to spring Varuna out of a walk camp should her meeting with Michael Dowd go wrong. And it certainly seemed like things would go bad. For the first time, Cart Logistics had to approach Hegemony World openly. No silent running, no signature jammers, no turned-off transponders. They had to act like a diplomatic delegation, and, as far as they could say, that did not include skulking around in the shadows like thieves. As a result, the final approach to Chicomastoc was a bit tense, as crews wondered if these were their last days of freedom, and made plans on how to break out of high-security prisons and walk camps. But no complications arose. Some patrol fleets pinged them with their sensors and sent them messages about obeying hegemony laws. Some merchants sent them adverts, and one ludic priest tried to convince them to land on the planet and never go to space again, but other than that, they arrived on Chicomastoc Station without any issues. They were just one fleet out of many, as the spaceport above Hegemony capital was bustling with activity. A flight controlman, who sounded like he was bored out of his mind, assigned them a docking spot, and soon they were anchored in the station, where a grey-faced customs officer and his escort blankly looked at the empty cargo holds and stomped away, clearly disappointed that they didn't find any contraband. And then, as weird as it might sound, all that was left to do was to open up internal station comms and call in the office of High Hegemon. It sounded like a joke, and in a way it was, but Michael Dowd liked to style himself as a servant of the people. Anyone could call his office, but of course calling his office and actually talking to the most important man in the sector were two different things. "The Hegemon is currently unavailable," a cold, emotionless voice said, and then disconnected the call when Veruna requested a meeting. She tried again, and this time immediately started by saying that she's here with diplomatic mission from Persian League. The cold voice asked her to transfer the keys. "Please hold," the person said. It took 2 minutes of complete silence before the voice returned. "The High Hegemon is available to meet with individual going by the name of Mr. Cart personally. Other crew members or bodyguards are unacceptable. Weapons are unacceptable. Failure to comply with these requests will be considered a violation of diplomatic protocol. Should I send the shuttle?" Verona looked at her boss, who, even with his face obscured by the helmet, did not look good, but at this point, what else they could do? "Yes, please send it," Mr. Cart replied, and a tiny contact appeared on their sensors. Just a small cabin with engine straps to it, no doubt designed solely to be used for short interstation trips. "Guess the big man knows who we are, boss," Veruna said, as she helped him prepare to leave. It was a bit more complicated process than it seemed. His cart had an inbuilt laser cutter, which could be considered as weapon, and they really didn't want to risk bringing it along and aggravating Dowd right from the start. So they dismantled that piece of his lower body and then got to the airlock, because the shuttle was already waiting. It was, Mr. Cart noticed, a fully automated machine. Perhaps the Hegemon wanted to preserve some of his privacy, but then again, why would someone so important care? Still, with no other options, he boarded the shuttle, and as soon as he strapped in, the small vehicle rushed across station's internal tunnelways, and mere minute later arrived near a shipyard area. A half-built cruiser was hanging there, with myriads of small figures floating around it in vacuum. The shuttle docked near a seemingly unremarkable airlock, and as soon as it opened, that cold-voiced receptionist appeared behind the door. "The Hegemon will see you now," she said without even looking at him. If she was surprised to see a malformed half-man, half-machine, she did not show it. "If you would please follow me." He did, and she led him across utilitarian corridors, filled with tools and building materials. The boss wasn't sure what he was expecting, but he certainly didn't think High Hegemon would be living in some cramped engineering quarters on the underside of the dock. But Michael Dowd was not a man who demanded opulence. When another doors opened, Mr. Cart saw a Spartan, strictly utilitarian office. A desk, uncomfortable-looking chair and screens, so many screens, which fed all the information the Hegemon needed right to him. The only thing that could be considered decorations was a flag of hegemony hanging on the wall, and a coffee machine on the desk near said wall. This was a place of work, and clearly no distractions were allowed. And there, behind that desk, hidden partially by all the screens, sat the High Hegemon. He raised his finger as the doors opened, pressed some buttons on his console, and all the screens went dark. He stood up, and as he did, Mr. Cart saw a plain-looking, dark-skinned man in his 50s, dressed in a suit that was just as clean and unadorned as the room around him. He looked at the receptionist and nodded, and the woman wordlessly walked away, closing the doors behind them. Then he walked out from behind the desk and directed his attention towards his guest. High Hegemon was quiet for a moment. Instead of talking, he gave Mr. Cart a look-over from head to wheels, and then, with a hint of a satisfied smile, he nodded. "As predicted, Domain Era Starship Purpose-Grown Pilot, Iteration 27, designed for seamless connection to shipboard neural systems, as well as longevity for long-distance interstellar journeys. You're probably older than myself and my entire staff council combined, aren't you?" Mr. Card did not respond. He had no idea what to say. This was not the greeting he expected. Instead, he just nodded. "Now then, no need to be so surprised, Mr. Card," the High Hegemon said, his self-satisfied smile now gone, and his face once again completely neutral. "As much as you may consider yourself a special case, you are not one. There are 3 of your kind working for Hegemony Navy as we speak. I believe you may have, at least technically speaking, met them by now, or at least they have met you." "If I did, then," Mr. Card began, and then stopped to think. Something hit him, something that seemed so obvious now. He looked Michael Dowd straight in the eye. Those signal ghosts, the ones that always keep their distance, that was them, right? "Very much so," Dowd said, with a voice like a teacher praising a well-learned student. "Other pilots of our Navy couldn't keep up with you, so we sent, well, you. Other versions of you. Only, unlike you, with backing of national budget behind them, so they could see you without giving themselves away. They were all actually surprised your scanners detected them. Said you must have done some serious modifications to your sensor suits to pick up their movements even through the masking beacons." "We can't really dodge pirates if we can't see them first," Mr. Cart replied dismissively, but Dowd wouldn't have any of it. "Yes, pirates, and our patrols, and our navies, and other fleets like Syndrians and Tritachyon looking for you. But it's beside the point, really. All 3 of your brothers asked me to pass on compliments. They seem to be in agreement that living rough as a freelancer made you a lot better pilot than they are. After reading their reports and realizing that they only kept up with cart logistics because they had far better equipment, I am inclined to agree." "Very, very kind of you," the boss said, his mental stability completely dismantled. He expected to meet a dictator of a police state, someone who would scream and threaten him with prison or execution. Instead, he was being praised. And he had his brothers, someone he could talk to, someone he could maybe connect with, someone who knew about old days. And then, a cold drop of sweat rolled down his malformed spine. "Dowd is using your conditioning against you," the always alert part of his mind said. "Don't be a good clone. Don't accept headbutts from an important human. Don't sell your freedom for joining your fellow clones in his kennel. Do what you came here for and get out before he worms his way into your brain." It was like a slap in the face. Mr. Cart looked at Dowd and saw no emotion in his eyes. A look of calculating strategist, patiently waiting for his enemy to make a move. "Very kind, High Hegemon, but I am afraid if you want to hire me to train your other clones how to fly properly, you'll need to back your praises with a lot more credits." Dowd was silent. Mr. Cart wondered if this was the moment when he was about to be dragged off to a gulag somewhere, but Dowd just shrugged. "Hiring you was never my intention, Mr. Cart. I admit I wanted to indulge my curiosity, but you made me realize that this is a luxury I cannot afford. You came here with words from League's Horace Yarube. Deliver them and get to the point that Provost Baird sent you here with." It was as if the room suddenly became colder. Dowd's eyes remained neutral, but it was clear that he did not find Mr. Cart's question amusing. So he simply pulled out a datapad that Varuna brought from Persian Noble and placed it on the desk. High Hegemon spent another 5 minutes in complete silence reading it through, and Mr. Cart decided to not interrupt him. "I shall talk to Yarube, if he so desires," Dowd finally said. It was impossible to tell whether this message had any effect on him, as his face remained perfectly still. Was there anything else he wanted? He asked to put in a good word for him, though I'm not exactly sure what to say. It was my assistant who met him personally. "Of course. Well, when I'll talk with him, I will inform him that you put in that good word. My advice, though, take care around people like Horace Yarube. He may sound like a reasonable person, but he is a politician first and foremost. Whatever he says and whatever he does is to improve his own position." "Aren't you a politician too?" "I am, which is why I know how he thinks. But Yaribei is inconsequential to you. I am thankful for receiving this message, but the rest of the matter is no concern of yours. Now, the real reason you are here. Provost Baird sent you. Explain why." And Mr. Card did. He explained how, over the past few years, Galatian Academy worked on continuing the projects of previous provosts to reopen the gate network. He told how Anahita tried to learn from this mistake and worked to avoid any problems and incidents, and finally explained that, right now, the preparation phase was almost entirely done. But that meant that someone had to once again tamper with the gates, and that did not end well last time, when entire Galatia system was cut off from the rest of the sector for almost a year. Dowd listened to this with calm expression, but several times his eyes narrowed. "I appreciate that the Provost wants an official approval of her deranged plan," he said when Mr. Card finished, "but I would have preferred if she asked for it before she began. Never mind. I could send the fleet to Academy right now to confiscate her research and remind her who finances her organization, but let's say I am inclined to agree, because you, Pilot Card, were so persuasive. I am going to need guarantees, once of exclusivity of this technology, and once of safety. I do not want another system disconnected from hyperspace in the name of some idea that may or may not work. I am going to need the Academy to work with our research departments on it, and I will require something from you, Mr. Card." The boss felt a chill running down his spine. Off to prison, he thought, but didn't say anything and just nodded at that to continue. "There is a man in your fleet I want transferred into our custody. You know him as Dr. Disco, and he is, let's just say, not a man who should be spending his days on escapades to the edges of the sector." "You mean that you want him to himself to use as hostage against Syndrian Dictate, right?" Mr. Card said plainly, and for the first time Dowd seemed surprised. "So you know. Interesting. In that case, yes, that is precisely the reason why I want this man in our custody. To think, Alexander Andrada, son of none other but Grand Admiral Philip Andrada, Lion of the Syndrian Dictate, was hiding all this time in a fleet of smugglers, pretending to be a doctor. No wonder his father'd order his navy to be on the lookout for you. And he didn't get him, and I'm afraid I have to refuse your request as well. Mr. Card, please be reasonable. Yes, technically he will be a hostage, but I do not intend to cause Alexander any harm. What I do want, however, is to talk with him and understand him. And then, more importantly, explain to him how his father's rebellion was a misguided move, so that one day, when he succeeds him, he would lead Syndria in a slightly more reasonable way. Which translates to you placing him on Syndrian throne as your puppet. I'm sorry, but the doctor said it plainly to me. He wants nothing to do with his father or politics in general. That is why he changed his name and fled. And do you think that his childish wishes are more important than fates of entire nations and solar systems? I know that he has free will to make such a decision himself. Do I approve? No, but that may be because I was designed with a sense of duty by my creators. But still, what you want is for me to hand over a crewmate as a prisoner, and CART Logistics doesn't leave its employees behind. I understand. A leader needs to have integrity, even a leader of a band of smugglers. Very well then. I was about to ask that if you don't want to hand over Andrada, then perhaps you'd be willing to deliver the woman known as Zala for trial, but I guess you won't part with her either. Then in that case I will not force you. Just keep in mind that there are other people, including many ambitious captains and admirals of Hegemony Navy for instance, looking for some of your crew members. You are aware, of course, that, for the good of humanity, I cannot stop these people. I know, but thank you for a fair warning beforehand. Consider this a token of goodwill. You may be right, Hegemony does stand to gain from Anahita Baird's project. If she keeps her word, tell her that I accept, but also remind her that I will be watching. Now, don't let me keep you. And just like that, the audience with High Hegemon was over. He returned behind his desk, and the cold-voiced receptionist appeared in the door to escort Mr. Cart out. But as he was turning to leave, he felt the urge to ask one last question. "How do you know so much about what we do?" he said, and Dowd gave him a slightly annoyed look above the desk. "It is my job to know things, Mr. Cart. But if you think I'm using some mystical tricks or unknowable technology to track you personally, then you are flattering yourself. Compared to true threats Hegemony faces every day, your fleet is not even classified as a nuisance. No, the reason I know many things about you is simple. Despite what you may think, there are still patriots out there. True ones, people who believe, not just in hegemony, but in humanity and its laws and order. Some people believe that our industry or that our fleets give hegemony its strength, but in truth, it is patriots like these who keep us going forward, whether by working, fighting, or simply listening. And sometimes these patriots, well, they work in very odd and unpatriotic places." Mr. Cart's jaw would have dropped if it wasn't inside his helmet. Looks like they had a rat in the fleet, and judging by all the Hegemon knew, this rat must have been active for years, which meant that Dowd knew everything. The smuggling, pirate deals, black market operations, maybe that's how they even learned about Midnight Dissonant. But only few people knew about her, at least to Mr. Cart's knowledge. Then again, a spy could have access to technology to detect her, so it could be anyone. No, the boss thought. This way lied madness. Dowd was trying to get under his skin. He'd return to the fleet and get back to work and not mention this to anyone. He would not succumb to paranoia. But he will keep an eye open for this rat in the future. And, as it happened, he did not have to wait long to learn the truth.
It just works.